to start with a few lines of poetry this morning. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. 100 years ago, Irish poet W.B. Yeats penned these words amidst a time of intense change, war, and disillusionment. The early 20th century had seen amazing new inventions like the automobile and the airplane and the radio, along with so much more connecting the world in unprecedented ways, for good or ill, seemingly all at once. Horrific wars had recently been fought at enormous loss of life, most of all the devastating First World War. Life was moving and changing so rapidly that it could feel at the end like the end of the world. And as only our poets can do, Yeats captured in his poem entitled The Second Coming that unsettled moment. And he asked the biggest question on behalf of all in the midst of such tumult and conflict: is this the end? Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. I kept returning to Yeats's poem this week, a poem with which I became very familiar in my many years of teaching high school English. Kept returning to Yeats as I took in these devastating verses from the prophet Jeremiah we received today. Jeremiah channels the collective trauma of God's people who have been through so much for so very long. But as many of us can relate, even the briefest respite or seeming calm amidst relentless waves of conflict and devastation can lull the human psyche to sleep. We long for relief from our grief, our worry, and our fear. The prophet Jeremiah is always here to remind us that danger awaits. A blistering wind from the bare heights, it rages in the desert toward my people, not merely to winnow or cleanse. This wind is too devastating for that. We might be surprised at how tenacious the prophet is throughout this book in keeping unsettled and emphasizing the people's fears and collective anxiety. Today is no different. Jeremiah penetrates any sense of safety or even fleeting security. The danger is not over, and the people must feel it. I feel it. Jeremiah gives voice to those fears and seems intent on stirring them up. I wonder how this feels to you. I'm torn between admiration for the refreshing honesty that says we are not okay, and dismay at being reminded, almost completely void of a hopeful word, that we are not okay. It seems in times like these, on the anniversary of September 11th, in the midst of global conflicts, counting prices for eggs and milk and gasoline that some cannot afford, as the world processes the end of a 70-year reign of a queen who was widely revered and admired, a steady presence through great trials and tribulations, and who also presided over an empire contending with the dark sides of colonization in its history. In times like these, Jeremiah's words can be both solidarity with us in our troubles and also a strong warning against devolving further into void and chaos, taking the created world with us. I looked at the earth, and it was without shape or form, at the heavens, and there was no light. See the reverse of creation, the story in Genesis in reverse, from order to chaos, from light to darkness. the center cannot hold. There's one more thing the prophet Jeremiah reminds us today. It won't be easy to hear, like any of the stuff we already heard was easy to hear. But Jeremiah insists that we hear this too. God is frustrated also. God is frustrated when the people are willfully complicit in moving the world away from faithfulness and love, away from justice and mercy, away from order and goodness. God is frustrated and asks, will we ever learn? Will we ever honor our beginning in divine goodness and work to create and renew and restore the world to its good? Or will we continue to go backward, away from God, numb or ambivalent to God's good desires for the flourishing of the world? I, for one, am deeply grateful for the raw honesty of the poets today, because we are not all right, and things are not all right. We are skilled at doing wrong, inept at doing right, the prophet says. The best lack all conviction, and the worst are full of passionate intensity, cries out the poet Yeats. My friends, sometimes we cannot course correct before acknowledging we are not presently on a good path. When the poets and prophets shine a light, even on the hardest parts, it is the beginning of new possibility. It is the beginning of new hope. And this is where Jesus' words are such a gift to us this morning. Jesus is hanging out like Jesus does with the wrong people, according to the powers that be. And he paints this wonderful picture of God's tenacity in love and faithfulness to us, in the reckless love of a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep in a lurch to hunt high and low for the lost one, in a woman who throws a party that costs way more than the missing coin she has called all the neighbors to celebrate finding. God is intent on finding us if we feel lost, left out, tired from trying, ready to give up. Don't give up. God lovingly pursues us, calls us, restores us, and rejoices in us when we are found and when we return. This is the heart of God for us, my siblings, that we would not be content with less than God's dream, that we would not fall asleep or fall away, that we would know God will never give up on us. And for anyone today who feels far away, who might have grown numb or indifferent, who longs for a renewed relationship with God and others, know that God is even now searching us out, calling for us, and rejoicing in you and me whenever we return. Amen.